It's Thursday again, which means it's time for another episode of Mindset Win with York and myself. And I'm very excited to be speaking about this one as well, York, to get ourselves into the right mindset here. You know that Red Bull does work with a lot of break dancers as well, and is very engaged there. Have you met many of the breakers?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to meet a lot of them already. Very interesting group of athletes for sure. And I don't think a lot of them would even want to be called athletes. So maybe we'll get into that a little bit in a minute as well.
We definitely will, because the guest that we're talking about today and who I interviewed this Tuesday is definitely one of the most creatively and original breakers on the hip hop scene. Here is Phil Wizard.
So you just have to find your why, the purpose of like, what do you really, and it's the simple answer of like, what do you enjoy doing overall? Doesn't mean you have to enjoy it all the time. There are sometimes bad days, sometimes good days, but overall, when you come back, you're like, oh, I really, really love to do this. And I can see myself doing this for a very long time or the rest of your life.
So York, you just said the breakdancers don't necessarily want to be called athletes per se, which basically perfectly fits what Phil said on our interview. He had a really nice quote, and that said, "Think like an artist, train like an athlete." What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's a really great quote that I've never heard before. But I think it really describes the breakers quite well, because they are sort of torn between this world of creativity, expression, showing their feelings and emotions and through dance, but then to be able to actually pull off all of these moves that they're doing, you have to really train like an athlete or even live like an athlete, because you need to take care of your body and mind to be able to actually fling around like that. It's really interesting. But then at the same time, why I said, they probably don't want to be called an athlete is because they do place a lot of importance on this creative aspect, on this artistic aspect as well. And like I said, expressing through dance, which I guess, wouldn't be true for a lot of the athletes from more traditional sports. If you're a 100-meter sprinter, you're not really going to express your feelings through your sport, but that's the element that they have. So it's a really interesting, halfway point between art and sport.
Yeah, and I really found it so interesting how he explained where he gets his inspiration from, like from a regular walk or from a conversation he overhears. But then that's not the only way he trains his mind. I loved how he said that he actively practices positive self-talk, and that he personally has to, because he said that he's basically naturally someone who's rather strict on himself or a little negative.
Yeah, for sure. I think self-talk is something that we can definitely dive into today. But just before we go into that, I just want to share this really interesting experience that I've had with the breakers, where usually I will talk to athletes about, what does mental health mean to you? What does mental performance mean to you? What's the interaction between those two? And usually from most athletes, you get the answer of like, okay, well, you need a solid base of mental health to be able to perform, and then you can work on your mental performance. But interestingly, with the breakers, I came across all of them almost saying, well, it's obviously when you have high mental health, a high level of mental health, you feel happy, everything's good, but they find that often they don't perform as well. So for a lot of them, they said it was true that they had their best competitions, their best battles, whenever their mental health wasn't at the highest level, whenever they actually went through some really difficult times, and they were able to express all of that to kind of use their struggles as fuel for an incredible performance that they couldn't have done otherwise. So, when you talk about inspiration, I really like how Phil was also sharing that, like, okay, he watched swimming on TV, and then the front crawl gave him the inspiration for a new move and everything. And that's kind of like that's one source of inspiration. But I just wanted to share as well that for a lot of the breakers, actually going through some struggles, through some difficult times, can give them maybe not inspiration as much, but really just some drive, some fuel for great performances.
So interesting. And I mean, yet Phil tried to obviously not be in this rather low state, but he's trying to elevate his self-talk, to use the word
Sure.
again.
Yeah.
And as I said, I found it so interesting how that was an active choice. He said, like, no, I have to remind myself to be kind to myself.
First of all, if you or listeners at home sometimes think it's a bit crazy that you're talking to yourself, either in your head or out loud, you're not. This is completely true for everyone, especially in some situations where we're driving or heading into an important meeting or whatever it is. Our self-talk just increases and we just start talking to ourselves a lot, and that's normal. It's okay. It's part of life, and everyone reports that. Especially the athletes from like endurance sports will
Yeah, I
like
can imagine.
consistently talk to themselves throughout the whole training and racing and everything. And personally, I come from the sport of swimming, where you actually are not able to talk because your face is in the water. So self-talk was definitely a huge part of my athletic career. So that's the first thing. Like, self-talk is normal. We talk to ourselves. We can't turn it off. We will always talk to ourselves. So I think that's just something that you just have to acknowledge. Like, it's
You can't
always
turn it off?
try it.
I mean, I know that I can't, but I always thought that it's just my lack of skill there, truly.
No, but you can try as hard as you want, but at some point you're always going to start talking to yourself again. There are moments, you might call this like the flow state. There are moments when there's less self-talk or even no self-talk, but it's really difficult. I've not met many athletes who have said that they can actively turn it on like that and stop talking to themselves. So I think it's just something that you just have to acknowledge, that self-talk is going to be there.
Okay.
But of course we can either just let the self-talk do what it wants and just let it come naturally, or we can take control of it. We can actively use even like pre-scripted phrases to actually use the self-talk to our advantage. And I think that's kind of what Phil was describing there, that he's changed from just letting self-talk be there and just letting it do whatever it wants to do, to changing it to actually taking control of it and using it to his advantage. So there's different types of self-talk as well. We can use more the motivational self-talk or more instructional self-talk, or actually this kind of self-argument self-talk as well. And in different situations, you might need different types of self-talk, but you can kind of pre-script it. You can prepare it to then be ready in a certain situation to just switch on that certain self-talk to help yourself get out of a certain mindset or something like that. Does that make sense?
It totally does make sense. And I'm dying to know how you've been working with athletes in this preparation kind of area. Like, what would sentences or phrases be that you guys, prepare together to have it on the tip of your tongue or mind or whatever in the moment that you actually need it?
As always, this is, of course, very individual.
Yeah.
It's different for every athlete. There's not like a golden script. But I kind of call this the mental pre-performance routine. But a lot of times athletes will report that they have these certain routines, behavioral routines, but in their head it's different every time. So they might be going through the same motions.
Yeah.
But then sometimes they're thinking, today I'm going to win, I'm feeling great. And then they can do the same thing, but another day they say, oh God, I'm not feeling very well today, I think I'm going to lose. And the aim is basically to then give them a pre-script
Yeah.
that they can use to also have this kind of routine, almost like a ritual, to stop the head from thinking negative thoughts and just think really clear, instructional, motivational thoughts. And that can be, like I said, pre-scripted. So we can actually, with the athletes, I actually work on writing it down,
Yeah.
trying it, okay, adapting it a little bit, and so on. And then the most important thing about it is to have a cue word, so something that starts it, so that whatever situation you're in, if, for example, then your cue word is "let's go," then it's like, okay, you think "let's go," and then immediately after that, the rest
The
of your
routine
self-talk kind of
starts.
like the credits of a film. It just comes up, and yeah, you can use that to really trick yourself to change into a more positive or more constructive mindset.
Could you actually give us an actual example? Do you say, today I'm okay, or I'm safe, or I know what I have to do, or what could words and phrases be?
Yeah, those are pretty good ones. I always encourage the athletes to have motivational and instructional. So first of all, maybe starting with, okay, let's go, and then a very clear instructional self-talk, which might change from day to day.
Mm-hmm.
So let's use tennis because it's such a obvious and clear
Instructional, that's so
example.
crazy. That blows
Yeah.
my mind. Yes.
So as a tennis player, maybe if you've realized, or maybe you know that the opponent has a very strong forehand, maybe then you start with your script being, okay, let's go. Always play onto his backhand, get close to the net. So really give yourself that instructional self-talk. Couple that maybe with some visualizations as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then finish with a motivational self-talk. Something like, you've got it in you, you've done the hard work, today is the day when you show it and you can beat him. Something really simple, like whatever your language is, say it in your language. But make sure you just use instructional and motivational and positive. Very often we couple it with music as well, which is really fun. So for some athletes, I even go as far as recording this for them. Either they record themselves or I say it on a recording, and then we put music underneath it as well. So their favorite kind of motivational pump-up song, which then you hear the music, and then over that you hear the voice
your cue,
of,
maybe, yeah.
come on, you can do this. You can imagine that immediately can change from a negative mindset to a way more positive and activated mindset.
Do you practice this with some of the athletes as well? I mean, obviously not the song voice combo, but if they don't have this, just like, okay, sit down now and tell yourself 100 times. But because just as your routine, your physical routine, I can imagine that you need to, have it right there, like an automatic kind of, rundown.
You're completely right, apart from sitting down. So
okay, yeah, fair.
There's no point in doing this sitting down in an office or anything like that, because the athlete is obviously on the field. Mm-hmm. So as much as possible, we try to do this during their physical training or any other kind of cognitive task or something that, we work a lot with, like reaction lights and tennis balls and things like that for some visual training and cognitive training, and actually using this pre-scripted self-talk in that situation so that the athlete immediately feels the difference as well in how they approach a task. So it's really important to practice this as much as possible, because if you then get to the situation where you want to use it, and in that moment you're thinking, oh, hang on a minute, like, what was it again? How did I start? Then it's too late. So it needs to be really automatic, that you can just recall it immediately.
That is so cool. And just thinking from a listener's perspective right now, I mean, you have given us a couple of examples, instructional and motivational, but what if I'm not very creative at home right now, but I want to maybe write down my motivational and my instructive. And what was the third one? You had a third one too.
More like self-argumentation.
Self-argumentation.
Which I wouldn't use pre-task, but it's more for post-tasks or after I've done something. we've talked about this before as well, this negativity bias that immediately after an event, I will be drawn to criticizing myself and saying, oh, I didn't do that very well, that didn't go well. But then using this other voice in our head to say, okay, well, yes, that didn't go very well, but why did it not go very well? This other part went very well. So kind of just this, almost like a dialogue in your head. And that's, we often call this like the self-argumentation, because you're arguing with yourself rather than just having this one singular perspective.
I love this. I definitely want to do this at home myself now and just, have one default rundown for each situation. So how can I get started? Do I just sit down and hope that I'm choosing the right words, or can I get inspiration from somewhere, or will you speak and like give me an audio memo?
I could. But I always say the best coach you will ever meet in your life is yourself. Because the best coach is someone who knows you completely in and out, and the only one who can ever be that is you yourself. So if you spend enough time thinking about it, you will find the best answer for what you need before a certain task.
Cool.
So maybe a good way to start is by actually writing down things that you don't want to tell yourself before you go into whatever situation it is.
Yeah.
It could be like a first date as well. Maybe like something you don't want to tell yourself before that is, you're not a very attractive person, no one likes you. That's not how you want to go into that date, but instead you want to say maybe the opposite, but you also don't want to go over the top. So what is the language that you do want to tell yourself? I accept myself maybe, or something like that. So I can't tell you or the listeners what to say to yourself, because you're always going to be the better person to do that.
Is there a recommendation for a certain amount of words?
Short. If it gets too long, it's too long.
Like 3 bullet points or 5?
In my experience, these kind of like mental scripts will last between 15 seconds and like maximum maybe a minute.
Yeah.
It's really quite short, because you want to be able to use it quite quickly and not have to take a lot of time to remember it as well and all of that. So it can be really, really short.
York, thanks again so much. I'm definitely going to try that. I'm going to sit down, or not, but definitely I'm going to find my words for these 3 situations that we talked about. And I hope, and I would love for you to try the same and then let us know how it worked for you. You can either leave a comment or review on the platform you're listening or watching. If you're watching on YouTube, shoot us an email on mindsetwin@redbull.com, or reach out to me personally if you feel like it on Instagram at Lisa_Ramushkat. That would be really cool. And of course, we will be back with our next interview and our next guest on Tuesday. So see you then.